November 16th, 1917. A man manages to escape while doing field work from the Oregon State Mental Hospital, and by November 21st, 1917, he's got practically the whole Portland police force chasing him through North Portland because he's a madman who's just committed the murder of a Portland police officer. All that and more on a fresh episode of Historic Murders of Portland. So in this case, we're dealing with a man named Louis Elwyn Hayes, who had been institutionalized at the state hospital in May 22nd, 1914. So by the time of his escape on November 16th, 1917, he's been institutionalized for a few years. He apparently had, paranoia delusions. Even as a patient, he had paranoia about what his, fellow patients were trying to do, what the doctors were trying to do. I think he thought people had it out to get him as a patient. So it was known that he was kind of in a constant state of serious, mental stability. It's really sad and really tragic. But it seems none of the doctors in the institution actually deemed him dangerous. Like, if he escaped, yeah, we need to catch him, but you don't have to stay up at night worrying about whether he's going to go out and start killing people. Well, what happens is, again, it's November 16th, and he's out doing like field work with like a group. I kind of imagine it's kind of something along the lines of like a police chain gang back in the day. They all go out as a group and they do work together, except I'm assuming these patients weren't chained together, although, with the history of mental asylums and sanitariums and things like that, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility, but who knows in this case. And apparently they're out doing, it says work in a field, so maybe they're doing yard work. I'm not 100% certain exactly what was going on. But whatever the case, it was really foggy, it was really overcast, and through the mist and the fog, Louis Hayes was able to escape. He was able to run away in the fog, and I don't know if he just got away long enough before, like, nobody noticed him for a while, and so he was able to get away to a point where he was too far away for anybody to know, or if he just evaded capture. But whatever the case, you have an escaped mental patient from the state hospital down in Salem, some 45 or so miles from where I am right now, right in the heart of what ultimately would happen. Who knows how, but he somehow manages over the next couple of days to get from Salem up to Portland. And one of the first places he goes when he gets here is to his mother's house, where she's living with his stepfather. There's always someone doing yard work when I'm trying to vlog. So it seems it's around the 21st. And maybe staying there a while. Parents always want to believe when they have, a loved one who's out of their mind and mentally ill that, we need to save them and protect them. So I don't know how long he was staying with his mother and stepfather, but it seems like they might have been giving him seclusion for a little while. And ultimately, it seems he kind of snapped. And under the threat of causing them unwanted harm, threatening their lives, he wanted money. And, they gave in and gave him money, because who knows what this guy was going to do otherwise. And then, right after that, he just split. And ultimately he ended up kind of in the vicinity of where I am now, where his sister lived with her husband. Spreadborough was their last name. They're only referred to that in the newspapers as Mr. and Mrs. Spreadborough. And they lived on Mississippi, right up here. I'm almost to Mississippi Avenue right now, and the house that the Spreadboroughs lived in is still here. This crime happened in 1917. The house, I looked it up, was built in 1903, so it's still here. So yeah, I'm on Mississippi Avenue between Shaver and then I want to say Mason is the next street up here. And right around the corner from this newer structure is the house that the Spreadmores lived in. Again, I'm just going to do kind of a pass by because but yeah, this is where Louis Hayes ultimately ended up. Is at this house right here. So the house is kind of obstructed in the brush behind me. There's this cool kind of general store over here, but here's where the house was located in the brush. Again, built in 1903. And this is where Louis Hayes ultimately ended up relocating to. And only his brother-in-law was home. His sister wasn't there, and his brother-in-law, Mr. Spreadborough, wouldn't admit him into their home. Which is interesting. That's how the newspaper describes it. They wouldn't admit him into the home like he was a patient when he was a patient. He knew he was institutionalized, and he knew he'd probably escaped. And so he just sat out on like the porch just waiting until his sister, Mrs. Spreadborough, came home. And of course, being sympathetic, being direct family, and being the sister of this guy, she allowed him to come inside. And it wouldn't be very long before authorities got a call from the Spreadborough home saying that they had a man there who was generally losing his mind. Obviously, this was Louis Hayes, who, maybe he came there to get money too, and was threatening them. But whatever the reason, they contacted the police, and maybe they knew. Maybe they tried to give him a shot, but they realized he had to go back. He obviously was still out of his mind. He wasn't ready to be free, and it was, he'd escaped. So, I mean, it wasn't like he'd left under legal means. And whatever the scenario that happened, that's kind of all we really know about it. The police are called to the scene of the house, back up there on Mississippi. There were so many people walking through there, I really couldn't. And Mississippi's a real popular, hangout place, so you can only linger there so long. But look at this place. But authorities were called there. And one of the officers to arrive on the scene was an officer, Robert Phillips. Now, it seems after contacting the authorities, they obviously did this behind Louis Hayes' back because he didn't seem to know they were coming. And his sister tried to distract him, knowing the authorities were going to show up at any minute. Tried to distract him by showing him like old pictures, maybe old childhood pictures. It's described as old pictures, a little bit of looking back into the past, a little nostalgia between them. And then the authorities show up, and by the description of the story, the police show up and they just walk right in. I mean, again, if they think, whatever the circumstances, they walk right in. And before anybody can do anything, Hayes sees them. He pulls a gun from his, pocket, coat, whatever he was wearing. He apparently had stolen this gun while he was staying with his mom and stepfather. He stole the gun from that home, so he was armed. He dived behind a stove, and the moment the officers came in, he opened fire. And officers tried to spread, but Officer Phillips was the one in front, the first guy inside. And the moment Hayes started opening fire, Phillips didn't even have time to pull his gun out before he was struck and gunned down, literally in the entryway to the Spreadborough home. and it seems like chaos ensues. Hayes is still trying to kind of back, he's still trying to hide behind random things, and he's just shooting as much as he can. And it seems the authorities get kind of spread out, and somehow, some way, Hayes manages to escape from the home there. There's no real description as to how exactly he was able to escape. Obviously, he was a pretty good shot, but there's no real description of how he got away, because he obviously couldn't go out the front of the house. That's where all the police were. He would have had to have bailed another way, out of a window or possibly out back. But just by coincidence, where I'm walking right now, this is an alley directly east of Mississippi Avenue, so this would have run right behind the Spreadboro home. An easy way of escaping, especially if officers aren't on the scene. And when you know it, right here, through this fence, that's where the Spreadboro home stands. So he could have easily escaped this home. Don't know if this fencing was even here. It's funny, there's an opening right there. I wonder if that was there in 1917 for him to escape through, but he could have easily fled out the back and ran, you know, that direction. He could have run this direction, but this was an alley, you know, that to this day still stands here behind where the home was located back there. So I'm pretty sure that while the police were dealing with one of their own being gunned down at the front door and trying to fend off dying themselves and a mad gunman, they got distracted up there on Mississippi Avenue, and Louis Hayes escaped down this alley, possibly running in this direction, who knows, but he was able to escape this murder scene. And this happened approximately 7:30 p.m. the evening of November 21st, 1917. And so from that moment on, Louis Hayes is a deranged mental patient on the run, clearly showing signs that he's still messed up, and clearly showing that he is not afraid to kill because he's just murdered a Portland police officer. So Louis Hayes manages to evade police for the whole night. I mean, obviously it's a lot easier to stay hidden under nightfall than it is in the daytime, so it's unknown exactly where he was during all this time. He was obviously lingering in North Portland based on where he was the night of the murder and where he ultimately ended up. The only real clue that authorities had, and I'm not even fully convinced it was actually Hayes, was approximately 11 p.m. the night of the murder, so about 3.5 hours after Officer Phillips is gunned down. There was a man who claimed that he had an encounter with Hayes several blocks several blocks east of here, which just seems like Hayes was kind of staying over in this area. Now, granted, he had a lot of hours free, so maybe he wandered that way, but I'm a little suspicious of it. But this man said he had an encounter with Hayes, and that Hayes, at gunpoint, made this guy give him some of his clothes, probably to change his appearance the best he knew how, under the circumstances. And so that was 11 p.m. the night of the murder. He goes unseen for some 9.5 hours. The police are just scavenging the whole city. I mean, one of their own has been killed. They're going to find this guy. They're just scavenging the city ceaselessly, working all night. But it wouldn't be till 8:30 a.m. the following morning that finally Louis Hayes is sighted again. And he was sighted right here. This is North Skidmore and Michigan streets. Michigan is this street. Skidmore is the one going across here. He was located in the vicinity of this intersection by police, it seems, because they immediately start opening fire on him. It is chaotic. The police have probably been up all night. They're probably tired. They're pissed they haven't caught this guy. He's already wounded somebody else. He's killed one of their officers. And these officers just, at this intersection, they just start unloading. They just start shooting madly. And, Hayes starts firing back as he's trying to, run away from the scene. Multiple shots fired. Nobody is hit. Nobody is wounded. It's just this chaotic event. I think you know, hours and hours go by and you start wondering more and more, like, what, you know, are we ever going to find him? What are the odds we're even going to stumble onto him? And then suddenly you see him and it's like, oh shit, where's my gun? And then chaos ensues at this intersection. And because nobody's hit, Hayes is able to escape the area. And based on where he ultimately ended up, we know he started going westbound in this direction. Again, this is Skidmore. He started running off generally in this direction. And it seems for a time, once again, the police, they were so close, they've lost track of where Louis Hayes is. So I'm now standing at the intersection of North Montana and Skidmore. Skidmore being the crossing street behind me. We're about 4 or so blocks west of where Hayes was seen at Michigan and Skidmore, about 4 blocks this way. So when he managed to escape that chaotic gunfire, he obviously sprinted this direction. Now the freeway is in between us now, but that wouldn't have been here, so we don't know if he necessarily ran down Skidmore or if he cut through streets that were once over here and went down this way. But either way, he ended up on Montana Avenue, which is the road I'm walking down now. And, you know, again, the police have been searching this guy all night. He's managed to evade them for hours, and he's killed one of their own. They are going to get him, unless he somehow manages to get out of the state, or I guess get out of the country at this point. So he manages to escape the police's clutches again. And this area is a lot different looking. Obviously, this isn't from 1917, but along this street, a woman living on this street, I don't know if she lived on this side of the street or this side of the street, waved down a fireman who was in the area, told him that she had seen someone acting suspiciously in the vicinity of the home of a guy named Alex Kovachuk. I knew there was a Chuck in there somewhere. Alex Kovachuk. Now, based on what the address was in 1917, Alex Kovachuk's house would have been near the next intersection down here. It would have been roughly this area right here. There's the next road down, which is obstructed by a sign, so I'm not sure what it is, but this next crossing, Kovachuk's home was a little bit closer to that intersection than Skidmore, so it would have been, again, like right here's where his home would have been. So this local person who lived in the vicinity flags down a fireman and says she sees this man acting strange and kind of menacingly in the vicinity of the home that was right here. So, you know, the police are chasing, you know, grasping any straws they can get their hands on to try to find Hayes. So I think it's pretty much assumed that it's probably Hayes. We're only a few blocks from where he was last seen, and he was seemingly, I guess there was like a chicken coop at this home. I don't know if this Kovachuk guy was a farmer or what exactly the situation was here, because obviously there's no homes here now. But he, that's what they say. They say that this mysterious guy was like looming in some chicken wire. And that brought the police to the scene. And it seems that once Hayes, it was obviously Hayes, once Hayes either became aware he's being watched, or maybe he thought he heard that maybe the police sirens were going off, for whatever reason, he actually entered the home. He entered Kovachuk's home and snuck down into the cellar. I mean, I guess if you're going to hide out in someone's house, you hide in the attic or you hide in the cellar. So just imagine it. You have the city's police force up in arms because one of their own has just been killed. It's been hours since his murder. Mason Street, that was his intersection. And imagine just a siege of police officers descending on this area. I'm guessing since Kovachuk's home was a little bit off Montana and Mason, there was probably a home here, and then Mason's home was here, or maybe his home was near the street and he had, you know, farm animals since he seemed to have chicken wire. But imagine it, these policemen sieging on the area. By the time we get there, you know, who knows exactly for certain if they realize that Hayes is still here, that Hayes is hiding in the cellar. Now I don't know if that differentiates from a basement. I don't know if they just called it a cellar when it was really a basement, or if it was actually like a cellar of some kind that was kind of an offshoot. of the house. But police swarm this area. Officers in the front, officers in the back. And they're out for blood. They open fire, seemingly without warning. I don't know if Kovacic, I don't know if he had a family, I don't know if any of them were home. They just start unloading rounds into the windows of the cellar. They just start unloading. Said more than like 50 shots were fired. So you think, you know, Hayes, who's already mentally ill, out of his mind, and he is just getting, he's just, you know, he has to be just crouching down. The windows are getting blown out. He's down underground here, just probably crouched to the ground trying to find a way to get out. And somehow he manages to escape. He escapes out back. Unfortunately, there's officers surrounding the home at all points. He's already gotten away multiple times, so they're not going to let him escape again. And by police reports, which I'm a little skeptical of, because it seems like they were going to kill this guy no matter what happened. He could have put his hands in the air, and I think they were going to blow him away anyway. By accounts of the officers who encountered him, he came running out the backside of the cellar. I'm guessing it's kind of the old school, like you have the 2 doors on the ground, you open them, and there's stairs that go down into a cellar under the house. He came flying out of there, had his gun drawn like he was going to try to shoot his way out, and because he had the gun drawn... Did she just say Steve? I don't know if they were yelling at me. That sounded like she said Steve, which makes me think that person knows me, either because I know them personally or because they know me for this. But anyway, it happens. He, you know, the officers say they told him drop the gun. He wouldn't drop the gun. He came at him, and they unloaded. You know, they probably emptied their weapons on Hayes, blew him away, and he dropped dead on the scene. Which again, if Kovacic's home was, again, kind of in this general area, you'd think his home probably went back to like here, so kind of where this curbstone is, this would have been like his backyard. This area would have been where Hayes came running out. There's officers waiting there, and they blow him away like right here in this general area. And that is how this thing came to an end. I mean, was there any doubt that it was probably going to end in massive bloodshed in relation to this mental patient who escaped and just went apeshit through this city? I mean, I don't think there was any way that Hayes was going to escape this ordeal with his life, even if it meant being caught, going on trial, and likely being convicted of first-degree murder and being put to death anyway. I don't think there was any chance that that was going to happen in this case. Once the police had him surrounded and again, 50 rounds, they were going to take this guy out right here. So this is where the story ended. This is where the life of Hayes ended, right here. So, no trial. I'm willing to bet there was no investigation into the police to see whether they could have, you know, this city certainly wasn't remotely as liberal and progressive as it is now, and it still has a long way to go, despite what people will have you believe. But 1917, I doubt there was much invested in investigating whether the police handled the situation properly. We only have the officer's word that Hayes came out gun drawn and they had to put him down. I mean, the guy was clearly out of his mind, so I wouldn't necessarily disbelieve that story. But whether he had a gun or whether he didn't, the moment he put himself out there to be seen, I think they were going to gun him down. And that's it from the site of the murder of a man who escaped from the State Hospital of Oregon. Sometimes those stories end, and sometimes they end horribly tragic, like this one, with lots of gunfire and lots of bloodshed on the streets of what was a full residential area back then. I mean, they said there was like over 100 locals were running out of their homes and arriving on the scene to see what was going on. You think there's got to at least be 8-10 police officers, and they are just unloading into the cellar of this random residential home in this seemingly quiet part of Portland. I mean, yeah, people were probably freaked. And, whew, speaking of getting a little freaked, how much would you pay me to go down that way? But anyway, that's the story. That's what we know from history. And once again, I want to thank you guys for watching. I don't know why I'm doing my outro while I'm standing next to the freeway, but what are you going to do? Again, thank you so much for watching this episode, another episode in this series. There's a lot of them. And remember, as always, to like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your cousins, tell your grandparents. Hit up my Patreon if you so desire. And if I'm not forgetting anything, till next time, guys, this has been Steve, the Amateur Historian, and I'll see you next time.